Hey there, ladies. It's Jen with My Sister and Me Ministries. Welcome to this week's Face-to-Face Friday. Mary Ann and I want to invite you into this space today as we continue our series, The Gift of Faith. The Gift of Faith. It's a beautiful gift from Jesus, and we just want to share those scriptures, the places he taught us about strengthening our faith and having more faith. And today we are going to expand that into not only leaning into our faith, but also learning about courage and focus and trust. And in that, when you think of courage, what do you think of? Most of us probably think of hard situations, difficult things, scary places where we have to boldly go and go without fear. Well, the without fear part is a little bit of the hard part, I think. You know, it's tricky. Because in those dangerous situations, it's hard not to be anxious or worried, but we can do that with Jesus, with our faith. And when you think about it, courage isn't meant just for these difficult, hard places. It's also meant for things in our everyday lives, things that might be harder for one than another, moving to a new city, starting a new job, trying out a new small group at church, going into a new hobby. You know, all of those things take boldness if we want to make something new happen in our lives. And so it's not just about the worst case scenario, right? And you've probably had to have courage at least once or twice, even today. So meet me in Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew. We're going to head to chapter 14 because we're going to look at a story about Peter and how he had to not only have courage, but also focus and trust in Jesus in this situation. So I'm going to start in verse 22. Immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. After dismissing the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but the boat was already a mile from land, battered by the waves because the wind was against them. Around 3 a.m, he came toward them walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. Immediately Jesus spoke to them. "Have courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter answered him, "command me to come to you on the water." "Come," Jesus said, and climbing out of the boat, Peter started walking on the water and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the strength of the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand, caught hold of him, and said to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased. Then those in the boat worshiped him and said, "Truly, you are the Son of God." So let's unpack a little bit of this. First of all, the disciples obeyed Jesus's command to get in the boat and go. They didn't normally just willingly leave his side. They always wanted to be with him, if for nothing else, protection. And they did listen, they did obey. And that shows Jesus's, his divine power, that he is the Messiah and that they did listen. Now, Peter, for a moment, had a lot of faith, wouldn't you say? He was the only one that asked Jesus to call him out onto the water. But if you think about it, they were in that boat for hours before Jesus came. I mean, it got dark, the evening came. Jesus did not rush away from his prayer time with the Father, but he had to know what was going on all along with the disciples. So at 3 a.m, I would say they were pretty weary by then, and no wonder they were terrified because they'd never seen someone walking on water before. So for them to think it was a ghost probably was a pretty normal reaction. We might have done the same exact thing. But Peter says, "Lord, if it's you, call me out." Because see, hearing the voice of his master, "Have courage, it is I." He doesn't say his name. He doesn't say who he is, but they know his voice. Peter steps out of that boat. His faith carries him out of that boat and onto the sea. And it holds him there for a minute. And then it's almost like his faith wore out. Like he saw the wind, he saw the waves, and he started to sink. "Lord, save me." How often do we say that? How often do we lose sight, lose our focus in our storms, that Jesus is standing right there and ready to lift a hand to us and save us. It's okay to cry out. It's okay that we use that as a time to strengthen our faith, because we do. Our faith does strengthen in those moments where Jesus does pull us out. But is it that we have lack of faith, or is it that we have lack of trust? I guess it could mean that. But Peter reaches out for Jesus. Jesus draws him close and tells him that he is safe. They climb into the boat. The wind stops. Jesus doesn't even have to say a word. He says nothing. The miracle had happened and the wind stopped. Did Jesus send them out on the boat ahead of him to test their faith? Maybe. Did Jesus rush even though he knew what was going on? Not really. So maybe being in the waiting room for some of us isn't really great. You know, we don't want to wait for an answer. We want a quick answer. We want to know now. What are we dealing with? When will this end? But we have to know, with courage and boldness, walking forward in our faith, that Jesus has us. He's never leaving. There's a quote that I read during my study time for this writing, and it's from a MacArthur New Testament commentary, and I want to share that quote with you right now. It reads, "The Lord takes us as far as our faith will go, and when it ends, we begin to sink. It is here we call out to him, and he again demonstrates his faithfulness and his power, and our faith learns to extend much further." Ladies, that's our prayer for you this week, that your faith would grow much further in every trial, and as you persevere through it, as you endure what's before you, that as God calls you into something new, maybe it's a new calling for your work in the kingdom, maybe you could walk forward with trust, courage, and focus. And I mean focus on him, not on your weaknesses, because that's what we tend to do. We tend to see our weaknesses above the equipping that God has already performed in our life. He won't send us without preparing us. He prepares the way, and then he makes the way. So, ladies, if there's something that he's calling you to do, we encourage you, step out in bravery, take that step, look to him and him alone, seek his face, and you will find him. And let your faith grow leaps and bounds. And all the while, we truly pray that you would hold fast to hope. Until we see you again, bye-bye.